Own it. Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum. Radio 1 FM 90.
Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
And a very warm welcome. This is Spectrum Radio 1. I'm your host.
On Spectrum tonight, should Ugandans buy shares in Umeme considering its performance in the power sector? Power company Umeme is selling off shares to the public in a campaign dubbed Power to the People to give both Ugandans and foreign investors an opportunity to own the company. According to the Umeme initial public offer plan, individual investors will take up 20% of the company's stock, institutional investors can buy 25%, international investors 46%, while 9% will go to Umeme employees and directors. This process has come at a time when Ugandans are continuing to voice their concerns about inefficiency in the power sector, with Umeme being accused of failing to meet its targets to reduce energy losses. In Parliament, a report is due following a 4-month probe by an ad hoc committee of Parliament into the energy sector. Another report by the Salim Saleh probe team was also published. Umeme's concession ends in 15 years' time, and some people have wondered why they should invest in a company whose contract may not be renewed. Those who are skeptical have suggested that the sale of shares could be a strategy by Umeme to rip off those who have invested, since some reports have suggested that the bulk of the money received through the sale of shares will be used to service debts. There are also questions about who exactly owns Umeme and why they have decided to sell off shares, yet they claim that Umeme is profitable and viable. People have also expressed concern about the high cost of a share. Considering that trading in shares is largely a new thing in Uganda, many people who would have invested are skeptical. But the latest information indicates that there has been oversubscription for the 46% stake allocated to international investors, hardly 3 days since the stock hit the primary market. So tonight we look at the decision by Umeme to sell its shares to the public to ascertain if this is a profitable venture for you to invest in. We will also look at the likely impact on the power sector over the next 13 years when Umeme will still have its contract running. Our guests tonight, Mr. Sam Zimbe, General Manager, Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at Umeme. You're most welcome, Mr. Zimbe.
Thank you. Good evening, listeners.
We're also joined by Mr. Patrick Mweheire, Head of Corporate and Investment Banking at Stanbic Bank. You're most welcome, Mr. Mweheire.
Thank you.
Mr. Zimbe, what is this Power to the People campaign all about?
Power to the People, simply it refers to Umeme's decision to float the shares within Umeme, and the main objective is actually to diversify ownership. Hitherto, the ownership has been in Actis. Actis Fund is a fund owned by the Commonwealth Development Corporation of the United Kingdom in the UK. Hitherto, they have owned 100%. It is now time for Umeme to go into another phase of extending the ownership base and restructure the company. Now, we have a huge investment program, and that program will cover the next 7 years. We've agreed targets with the regulator for the next 5 to 7 years. The company is robust. Our past performance is evident in the prospectus that was approved by the Capital Markets Authority. It provides all the financials. We engaged before going into the IPO. We engaged technocrats and reputable firms to carry out the various processes that have to be carried out before any company even attempts to list shares. We have Stanbic Bank as the transaction advisors. We had PricewaterhouseCoopers as reporting accountants. We have lawyers on the transaction. We have lead brokers, stock brokers, African Alliance, and a range of other consultants who have worked very hard with us before we actually issued a prospectus. When the prospectus was finalized, I must say that it also had to be put through another process. There is the regulator of the capital markets, the Capital Markets Authority, and of course the Uganda Stock Exchange, both of whom had
Uganda Securities Exchange.
Uganda Securities Exchange. Both had to carry out their own processes under statute, and they approved our prospectus. Now that gave way to the launching of the IPO. Reasons, you touched on reasons why we want to actually float the shares. Companies do that. Most efficient and profitable companies go to list shares.
We'll talk about that in a short while. Let's hear from Mr. Mweheire. How much do you target to raise? You transaction advisors, Stanbic. How much are you looking to raise?
The company is floating about 38.3% of Umeme, which translates to about $70 million. So that's the target we're raising on this offering.
What does this money to do? What's it going to do? Paying of debts or what?
Yeah, use of proceeds is for general corporate purposes. There will also be a payoff of a shareholder loan that Actis holds, which is quite expensive. I think it's paying over 10%, almost 12% a year in dollars. So it makes sense for Umeme to retire such expensive debt.
It's a shareholder debt by Actis.
Correct.
Is Actis active in other companies within the region?
Yes, Actis is quite active, but as you know, they're also a majority shareholder of DFCU Bank here in Uganda. They also owned a bank in Rwanda, which they're exiting, BCR, and they've got a lot of real estate investments in Kenya, as you know.
Are they divesting from other companies as well in the region?
Yes and no. I think by private equity firms, by their very nature of existence, hold investments for a period of 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's the basic premise. And so you will see them exit, but reinvest that money into new opportunities. They always have to show a return on their money, so they will have to exit at some point.
All right. Mrs. But apart from paying back part of this debt, what else are you going to do? How much is the debt, first of all?
It is around $20 million.
$20 million.
$20 million.
Yeah.
What happens to the other $50 million?
We have a huge capital investment program for the next 5 years, adding up to almost $340 million. So we will utilize the proceeds towards the funding the huge capital investment program. And this covers refurbishing the network, upgrading substations. You are familiar with issues like rolling out prepayment metering, all that require huge financing. And this is just a proportion which will really assist in that challenge we have.
All right, we'll talk about that in detail. We know that this year, the prepaid meter, it was piloted in Chitendela. How did it do, and how do you expect to roll it out later?
It went very well. We've just carried out an evaluation of the pilot. In all, we installed up to 11,000 meters, and that involved retrofitting, removing the old meter and putting in a new meter. It is not just installing a new prepayment meter. You have to do quite a lot with respect to the network to ensure that the network is refurbished completely. There's no point putting a new equipment on an old...
no power surges.
Yeah. No power surges as such.
That could destroy the meter, probably.
Definitely. What we had to undertake is, in the old connection, you'll have the solid wire running right down to the meter. In some cases, especially in Chitentele, we've been handling or installing meters in flats.
Yes.
And there have been other considerations because you can't run wires right up to the top of the flat.
What do you do?
So there have been cases where we had to use wireless connections.
Wireless electricity?
No, wireless connection to communicate between the keypad. A keypad is put into one's...
With a meter?
Yeah. No, the meter is somewhere else.
Yes.
Yeah, it is a split. The technology involves split metering. The meter is located somewhere else. It is located on a pole, and the customer only sees a keypad in their own premises. So you go onto your keypad and key in the units once you top up. But the feedback is that those who have had prepayment metering are very pleased. They can see their consumption, they can measure,
you can plan it.
Yeah, and plan.
No more guesswork. I've used it in another country, and it's the kind of thing you really want to look
We
at.
are rolling it out. The next area is is Natete, and work is already ongoing.
All right.
Now, rolling it up all over the country will definitely involve huge financing. We estimate that that cost to be around $200 million. And of course, the IPO is one initiative that will give us the platform to be able to proceed.
And probably borrow money from other people.
Very much so, yeah.
All right. Mr. Mweheire, what do investors gain by buying these shares in Umeme?
I think Umeme is an attractive investment proposition for a couple of things. One is, if you look at the sector, the power sector in Uganda in general, it's only about 11% penetration. When you compare that to our neighbors, Kenya is close to the 40% area. So you're buying into a company that has a lot of headroom for growth, just because you can expect that many Ugandans are going to be added to the grid. It's also an attractive concession. I think Actis did a good job. They've got a guaranteed 20% US dollar return on any investment made in the network. So you invest $100, there's a guaranteed return on that $100, and that's all throughout the life of the concession. So all those benefits can accrue to a shareholder. They also put in a dividend policy of paying out 50% of earnings going forward.
For the future, half
for
of the
the
money.
future.
Yeah. Last year, well, this year you expect to earn about what? 40 billion.
40 billion.
Shillings.
Yeah. So
20 billion is supposed to be
paid out. Exactly. So there's a good yield here, and because of the fact that this is a very stable business, they absolutely very little risk in the system. As long as the generation equation is sorted out, they are just a platform to transport this electricity, and they have got a guaranteed return on that. And we have this growth and the macroeconomic factors at play. So altogether, I put that in, and I think this is one of a very attractive proposition for investors.
And what's the response of
investors?
Well, the response of the people who are supposed to buy, are they coming, showing up?
Yeah, they're showing up. Like you touched on in the beginning, the 46% for the international was snapped up, and that was oversubscribed. We're beginning to see pretty good uptake in all our branches. And Umeme smartly appointed a lot of authorized selling agents, so there's 4 other banks involved in this that have access to, to applications and prospectuses. The brokers are all involved, and from what we're seeing, that there's quite a bit of interest, and we expect there'll be a lot more interest this week as people's salaries come in, and the close of the offer gets closer.
And it's open until when?
November 7th.
November 7th. So people can still buy shares in Umeme. Well, listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1 tonight. Should you, Ugandans, buy shares in Umeme, considering its performance in the power sector? Our guests, Mr. Sam Zimbe, General Manager, Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at Umeme, Mr. Patrick Mweheire, Head of Corporate and Investment Banking at Stanbic Bank. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Mr. Zimbe, how has Umeme been performing since it was sold off?
Our performance record has been good. According to the concession agreement we signed with government, and we started business in 2005 with a range of performance targets. The first one being investment. We had to invest up to $65 million within the first 5 years. By the end of the five years in the concession, we had invested over $130 million.
Oh, really? Double the amount?
Exactly. We had another target of connecting 15,000 new customers per annum. So we would have connected up to 60,000 after the 5 years. But we exceeded that and connected well over 80,000 new customers, notwithstanding the constraint in power supply during the period 2005 through 2010. The third target was to reduce losses. We started off with a high loss figure of about between 38 to 40%. The concession agreement actually required us to reduce losses to 28% by the 7th year. It was a huge challenge in the initial 4 years between 2005 and 2010, where we really had extensive load shedding. Tariffs were high, so the challenge of reducing losses was real. We worked hard, and by the year ending 2010, losses had actually reduced to 27%. where
27%.
yeah, against the 28% target in the
By the end
concession
of year 7, which is the end of this year.
this, which was February 2012.
2012.
Yeah, we had got to 27%. Of course, we have a long journey to go. Our target is to reduce losses to get to comparable levels in East Africa.
International standard.
We pledge ourselves to Kenya because we have similar characteristics, and Kenya is at around 16%. So we've agreed a loss profile or a loss reduction trajectory, reducing losses from the current level now of just about 26% to 14.7% by the year 2018.
And where do these losses occur mostly? Resistance in the kind of wire that you use?
There are a number of factors that contribute to these losses. In fact, we can categorize losses in two main categories. Technical, there's a technical component due to the nature of the network, and that would require a huge investment to address or eliminate the technical component.
What's the quality of the cable, the wires that you use?
The quality of the cable. Whether you use
copper versus aluminum?
Copper versus aluminum, I'll talk more about that. But the second component is non-commercial. Yeah, we call it non-technical. We estimate the split to be between 50 to 50, 50% non-technical, 50% technical. So you can see there's a huge percentage of losses in the network that is the result, or is due
non-technical.
Yeah, non-technical, due to theft, outright theft.
Yes.
This is what individuals connect illegally on the network, and of course our challenge and our focus is on the non-technical component. This can't be fought single-handedly. We need all stakeholders to work with us to reduce those losses, but we're on the way downwards to reduce losses. And considering that a 1% reduction equates to almost $3 million. So it is in the interest of all stakeholders to ensure that power thefts are removed or eliminated completely. In Umeme, definitely we are facing that challenge, and we are putting in place all strategies to ensure that we achieve the targets that have been set by the regulator.
One would expect that this IACA project, the prepaid meter project, would almost eliminate the power theft.
Not necessarily. The prepayment metering.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
We'll do a number of things. Yeah, definitely it is convenient to consumers because they are able to monitor.
Is it possible for one to steal power when they have a prepaid meter?
Yeah, it would ordinarily be difficult for a consumer to actually bypass a prepayment meter. I'm not saying that they can't do that. That is one of the reasons why we had to put in a pilot.
Right.
To assess how we can change and address issues like losses and of course customer service improvements.
And you have a target of $200 million. When do you expect to have it fully rolled out countrywide? You've had the pilot, now you're going to Natete.
Very much so. With the pilot, we definitely got a number of lessons with respect to technology that has to be used. We have had incidences where some of the meters actually have been tampered with. So we
this prepaid meter,
very much so. Yeah.
Some people use.
Some people have attempted.
They use technology, or is it drawn power?
Yeah, a number of some consumers have actually tried to connect directly, bypassing the meter. Of course, that takes some effort to climb a pole. But yes, some individuals have attempted to do that. So we are looking at various other technologies to see how we address that.
And very briefly, before we go for a break, this $200 million, when do you expect to actually roll it? Because I would like to know how you expect to raise the $200 million. Well, you have $550 million down in your bank account, $150 million. Where are you going to get that?
Patrick mentioned one of the main reasons for actually floating shares. It provides the platform to be able to raise finance.
Yeah.
So you leverage the $50 million.
Yeah, they could leverage. I mean, leverage is one way. They will also probably do a secondary offering to raise more capital from the existing shareholders. So they might do a rights issue. I think just being a public company just opens up a whole tool of capital. One, even just having bilateral lending with foreigners is a lot easier because they know this is a public company that has audited statements. There's, it's listed. So there's lots of opportunities, and we're discussing with Umeme about this investment.
And you think it's going to be easier once they're listed?
Yes, absolutely.
It's easier to quantify and watch their performance.
Yeah.
And just to add one point, because in addition to raising debt financing on the money markets, we also have the scope to look at concessional financing from the DFIs. So the listing is
DFID. DFI?
Development Finance Institutions.
Development Finance. Well, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. We're going for a break. We'll be back to stay tuned.
Everybody talking like this in the car, this in the bar. Doesn't even matter wherever you are. With Overload, what you really don't know is one number. You get a little bit more fun.
A little longer. Send text to all your loved ones and love a little longer.
Get 15% extra airtime guaranteed every time you load with MTN. Simply dial *145#. Get talking all day up to midnight with MTN Overload. MTN. Everywhere you go. John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He's just who he is. Special.
So here's to men like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Nile Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Nile Special. You've earned it.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight. Should Ugandans buy shares in Umeme, considering its performance in the power sector? Our guests tonight, Mr. Sam Zimbe, General Manager, Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at Umeme, and Mr. Patrick Mweheire, Head of Corporate and Investment Banking at Stanbic Bank. You will be able to call in and contribute to this discussion. Mr. Mweheire, what are the risks involved with this investment?
I think one of the risks that has come up is obviously the length of the concession. I think you touched on that. The fact that it has a finite life of an extra 13 years to go. But that risk, if you actually cut down to it, at the end of the concession, what happens? One of two things will happen. The concession gets extended, which is the most likely path, because Umeme would have invested a significant amount of the money in the network. And I don't think that anyone else will be looking to replicate that. And the government would want to leverage that investment. So if that doesn't happen, the concession allows for the invested amount at that point in the system with a slight premium of 5% to get paid back to Umeme and therefore distributed back to the shareholders. So there is a mechanism, this is even at the end of the concession, to do get some value for what is in the network. So it's important to put that risk in perspective. The other risks are just like anytime you invest into an equity investment, there's always the risk that the stock will have some volatility.
Stocks could go up or down.
They could go up or down. But I think in the long term, if you're a long-term investor, this is a stock that can only go one direction, just for the various reasons we talked about earlier.
Because they're monopolists anyway.
It's a structured monopoly. It's got good pricing. It's a commodity. Well,
Well, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. But it's also something...
Stable clientele, growing clientele.
It's a growing clientele. By the way, I mean, a huge part of their money comes out of corporate clients who rely on Umeme to produce goods and services. So not just
corporate
the retail
manufacturers, not the household owners.
Exactly. So those are, you know, that you can imagine this is mission critical for them, Umeme being able to survive. So I think you put all that in perspective. I think the benefits way outweigh the risks, in my view. And remember, there's a scarcity value here. We rarely see IPOs in this market. This is probably one of the largest IPOs after Stanbic, and will be for a while. So if you're looking to put some equity participation into a Ugandan stock, I think now is the time.
And at 275 shillings a piece, is that a fair price?
I would say it is a very fair price for a number of reasons. One is, if you look at the earnings per share of Umeme this year, it's about 30 shillings per share. So you divide that 275 over 30, this stock is being offered at a PE, price to earnings ratio, of less than 9 times. And that compares very favorably in the universe. The other thing to look at is where KPC, which I think is the most reasonable comparable company, Kenya Power. Kenya Power trades at 4.5 times EBITDA. So earnings before interest taxes. We're offering Umeme here at 3.8 times. So it's coming in at a discount to Kenya Power. And Kenya Power concession is a much more inferior concession as compared to Umeme. And then lastly, I think it's important to note that there is a incentive share that's being offered to Ugandans and Umeme consumers.
What's that?
So you get a free share for every 10 shares purchased. And that what effectively does, it brings down the purchase price from 275 a share to 250. So you effectively getting that discount to what the international investors have paid. They pay 275, and the money's already in the bank. Ugandans can come in at 250. So I mean, all of it, it seems like a no-brainer to me.
And you're saying some people have thought the price a little bit high. You could have brought it lower, you know, so you could have more people. Maybe the uptake would have been faster, sell out to the first day.
No, I think, well, the price cannot be looked at independently. You know, the metrics that I measured, the measures I gave you on a price to earnings and an EBITDA make this an attractive price.
You don't think you're looking at some people, the small owners, the women selling tomatoes at the stall in the market?
The minimum share amount is 1,000 shares, so we're allowing 275,000 is the minimum subscription. We thought that would be a fair.
All right. Mr. Zimbe, what are the benefits of Umeme, this power company, being privatized versus when it was UEB, owned by the government?
Yes, the main, of course, benefit has been the ability of the concession to attract financing and bring in the much wanted funding to refurbish the network. As I said earlier, since 2005 to 2010, or right up to now, we've relied on the Act's own injection of investment in the country. We also got some debt financing from IFC, $25 million, and of course the IFC decided to participate after looking at what Umeme had done to date and the future for the sector and for Umeme. Yeah, so the main benefit has been the ability to attract the most wanted financing to refurbish the network.
And how is power provision at the moment?
So
well, you have enough electricity from the...
That's right, yeah.
Power goes off even in the capital. Why is that?
No, let's start off by saying we really suffered, and I think you alluded to the perception between 2005 right up to 2011, especially in 2010 when we had acute load shedding. Definitely nobody wants to have their lights off, and they will complain. Unfortunately for us, we had to explain to the public, although we don't generate and we don't transmit, we only distribute. But we accept that we are the first of the sector with the public, and we've had to take all the wrath that came with load shedding. Luckily enough, government worked very hard to have Bujagali come on stream. We now have 250 megawatts coming from Bujagali, and with the other sources of generation, we can now meet peak demand. We have no reason to load shed. So,
yeah, but there's been load shedding. I know that there was load shedding yesterday in the center of the capital, for
very much. The outages that are being encountered, or that are encountered in place to place, are the result of either maintenance work going on. One thing we can't stop.
Well, this is a brand new.
One thing we can't stop is a fault on the network, both on the transmission network or the distribution network. Where a fault occurs, of course, we try to rectify if we can. If it is downstream at the distribution end, we try to rectify that fault as soon as possible and minimize the duration of the outages. But we are not having outages as a result of load shedding or a deficit in power generation. All the outages are the result of, as I said, faults on the network, and the one over the weekend was definitely a fault with our Mutunde substation, which I think works are going on right now. They are due to complete, I think, by the end of tomorrow.
Mr. Mweheire, could you take us through this IPO again to an ordinary person? What is it exactly? Buying shares in power to the people.
Well, an IPO, very simply at a high level, is providing the public, investing public, an ability to own a piece of a company. And, you can do that privately, you can do it publicly. But publicly is generally a lot more preferred and more transparent way of offering shares because it's managed and regulated by the Capital Markets Authority. There are a lot of onerous requirements actually on the company going forward, being a public company. It's actually a lot more painful for the issuer than it is for the investor. But I think that's for a reason, to make sure that, that the shareholders have absolute access and transparency. So this is just an effective way for everyone out there to own a piece of, I think, what is a good franchise. And frankly, if you think about the fact that a power bill is a big piece of your share of wallet, if you can own the company or a piece of that, you're effectively giving yourself a discount on one of your biggest expenses as well.
And how is the uptake?
The uptake's been good. I think, for most retail investors, they generally come in at the end. So we're going to expect a flurry of activity beginning mid of this week all the way to next Wednesday. We would not be surprised to see a lot of applications come in the last few days. But generally speaking, there's a lot of traffic at all the authorized selling agents, and people are asking the right questions. Prospectuses are being picked up. Accounts are being opened up with brokers. And there's a lot of financing in the market also for buying shares. A few banks have been quite aggressive about offering debt for people to buy shares. I've heard as high as 3 to 1. So there's a lot of people beginning to have those conversations with their banks. Yeah.
So you can basically borrow money to buy shares in Umeme. There are banks that are open to doing that.
Yes.
And where does one go if you have 300,000 shillings in your bank account or pocket and you want to buy shares? How do you wake up and what do you do when you wake up?
I would encourage you to speak to your primary banker. I think all the banks now are looking at the credit
all
worthiness.
The commercial banks.
They're looking at the credit worthiness of all their clients. So this would be an unsecured loan, so I think I would encourage you to just call up the banker and say, are you offering up anything for Umeme? I know there's banks out there that are doing this.
That is, regardless of whether you're borrowing or not. If you're not borrowing, you have your money, 3 million, you want a certain number of shares, 10,000 shares. Where do you go? How do you do it?
But I think because we have a time constraint here, I think it's going to be easier to deal with a bank that you have an existing relationship with, because we have to do this in the next 7 working days. So that's the only constraint.
And what happens if all the shares are not taken up in those 7 days, 7 working days?
We have a mechanism where whatever is left over from the retail pool gets added back to the qualified institutional investor. So these are money managers in the East African pot, and we have also seen significant interest in that. So the mechanism will be whatever is not taken up by the retail goes back into that pot. And we also have some international investors that were not fully subscribed. So we're not really too concerned about what the extra take-up will be. But I think we would love to see as much and broad Ugandan participation as possible. You know, I keep hitting back on the free shares incentive scheme. I think it's leaving real money on the table. So we'd like Ugandans to fully subscribe.
All right, Mr. Zimbe, are the dynamics right? You have you are only a distributor. You have generation, you have transmission. Are things working? You know, are they synchronized to welfare purposes?
Very much so. We definitely work with the sector entities, the generators, the transmitters, and you have to do that. Our main supplier, or our sole supplier, is UETCL, Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited. Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited deals with the power generators, but they all have their plans, and we try to synchronize, especially the refurbishment and upgrading plans of UETCL with ours.
That's the pylons and so on.
That's right, the high tension pylons. Of course, as we get more power on the grid, we have to ensure that the system downstream can actually be able to dispatch that power that is generated. Hence our focus on looking at high growth areas. We've seen quite a lot of growth in this sector. The growth rate is around 12%, much more than GDP growth, and moving for
power demand grows by 12%.
That's right. Yeah. So there's a huge, I think,
pressure on you.
There's a lot of pressure, definitely with respect to investment. We have seen a lot of demand from large consumers. We have about 2,000 customers, large consumers, who contribute up to 60% to our revenues. And most of those consumers are actually yearning for more power.
Right.
So the trend and the future for the sector is bright.
All right.
Our job is to ensure that we have the infrastructure in place to be able to evacuate that power to the customers.
Some people think you're doing this out of panic. There's a suit against Umeme and its local directors, James Mulwana, Patrick Bitterton, and Charles Chapman. It was filed by George William Alenyo, president of the Uganda Electricity Users Association. He says you're doing it in panic because there's the ad hoc committee of parliament that came out with a bad report against you. What do you say to that?
There's no business that can survive by that sort of reaction. Ours is a strategy that we embarked on long before. When Umeme started, it was always the intention of Umeme, and it is embedded in our concession agreements, to float the shares. So it's not nothing we've done.
How long have you planned it?
It was always part of the program.
Always?
Yeah, always in the concession agreements to diversify and allow or provide an opportunity for Ugandans to be able to own a stake in the company.
But yeah, also remember that Actis will retain 68% of this company. I mean, they will still remain a dominant shareholder.
Who else owns shares in Umeme? Actis once owned a large percent. They owned it 100% previously.
Yeah.
Now they're giving away 38.3%.
Yeah, that's right.
But they will retain that 60%.
They'll be the major shareholder still,
even after this.
Yeah.
The IPO.
So they're not really. I mean, there's no change. They are still the dominant shareholder.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. You can call in now. Our number is 0414-348-111, 0312-260-390, 0312-261-390. When you call in, please tell us your name and where you are calling from. Spectrum, hello?
Hello?
Yes, please.
Good evening.
Good evening to you, my friend. Your name?
Consumer of Umeme products called Power. Yesterday, a good section of Bunga that is on the same line with the National Water Works cover was hostile to the power. We had no power from 8 o'clock in the morning until I came back in the evening after a 12-hour break. Even in with him, there were intermittent breaks. I am supposed to be one of those people who can subscribe for a share in this company. Unfortunately, that was experience is not something I could buy. Two, you Edmond, Buster, have you bought shares in Umeme? I don't know. your answer. Lastly, why don't we have a transparency about the balkanizing of what used to be Umeme? Now you have many units that were put up, and each one of them has obligations financially to meet, to work there. Tell me one thing. So this shareholding offer for public, the owner, after all, the second one after Stanbic was the one for Safaricom. Today, a journalist was sent away by a highly profile person, and he belongs to the studio. Good evening.
Spectrum, hello. Well, let's get an immediate response to that series of questions. Let's hear from you again. Spectrum, hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, your name?
This is Olupot.
Mr. Olupot.
I want to add to that voice that has just gone off air, but we must learn from the story of Safaricom. Umeme is a limited company, which means they are not held liable for any losses. Because of the manner in which they have handled that, I think they have reached the effective end, imposing unfounded bills on consumers, and now they want to spread the risk. I wish those who are going to register their membership to the list.
Spectrum, hello. Please switch off your radio when you call in.
Hello?
Yes?
Very soon. I wanted to contribute to your discussion.
Yes?
You have been saying that you don't need the power to distribute, but if you really need the power to give me an accurate bill, or if you need the power to give me my bill on time, thank you.
Spectrum, hello.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for those officials. For me, I stand by them as long as the decision should not be done in a transparent manner, because this one is going to give the opportunity to own their own farm. Thank you.
All right, let's get back right here. Mr. Zimbe.
I'll start off with the first caller who raised some issues with the outages in Bonga. Yes, it was unfortunate over the weekend. As I earlier said, there was a fault on Tawa Mutondwe substation. And whether the company is faulted or not, these are issues you cannot take out of the system. What we do, as I said, is to ensure that we react promptly and try to deal with the fault. We informed our consumers, and as I said, I think we've been able to address and at least restore power at the earliest for most consumers in the area. UAB being dismantled and unbundled, that was a government policy. I think it was for good reason, because one of the main reasons was actually to ensure that private investment is brought into the country.
Well, part of that unbundled group was sold to a government-owned South African company, ESCOM.
I can only talk about the distribution concession, which was concessioned and to a private investor, and of course Actis has added value over the period, and of course we are now seeing the benefits of that investment, because notwithstanding the shortage in power generation, they stayed and they made sure that they fulfilled their part of the agreement, and now we are seeing the benefits of that.
This inaccurate billing. Do you need electricity to give accurate?
Yeah. With respect to bills, I think it is good news that we are embarking on prepayment metering. That is the only, I think, way a consumer out there who is worried about their bill can have satisfaction that what they are consuming is actually what they are being billed. That being said, we still get complaints that the prepayment meter is running fast. I think you will never remove complaints of that
Is
type.
that an accurate thing? You bought
No, because a meter can't run faster. It's perception. And where cases have been brought to our attention, we have looked and tried to explain that, yes, these are brand new meters, tested. The fact that your units are running faster, do some tests of your own.
You've done the UNBS test, the National Bureau of Standards.
We are linking up with UNBS.
Later.
No, in fact, we involved UNBS from the outset. They also visited manufacturers. And I'm told they are now working on a test bench. So we're working very closely with UNBS. And we have our own testing mechanisms. Another caller raised an issue comparing our IPO with the Safaricom. Patrick can respond to that.
Yes, Mr. Mweheire.
Yeah, I think that Safaricom was a very different business. I think you can separate the issues on that IPO in two buckets. One was the nature with which the IPO was actually conducted. 80% of that IPO went to foreign buyers, a lot of foreign buyers who had a very much more short time frame in the investing. So there was a lot of stock that was actually dumped back on the market immediately after the IPO. And that actually had a significant impact on the trading of that stock. But then when you step back and look at Safaricom at the time, it was not only priced pretty rich, it went out at north of 6 times EBITDA. Roughly at a time when voice tariffs were about to drop, Airtel was coming into the market very competitively, and Safaricom hadn't really come up with a data plan, so their data business hadn't developed to offset some of those voice revenues. So it was kind of a perfect storm of a business that was going into a very, very difficult time frame. Umeme is a very different business. We've talked to you about the certainty of revenue. It's almost kind of a sleepy business that makes money every day because of the nature of the good that they sell.
Whether you're awake or asleep,
yeah, exactly, making money. And it's also being priced at 3.8 times EBITDA, and you're getting a discount. I just find it very hard to see how you can make that parallel between Safaricom and Umeme.
And you're saying half of the money is going to be paid out to shareholders?
There'll be a dividend.
Every year they expect some money in the bank.
50%, yeah.
Yep. And they expect transparency.
There'll be extreme transparency. And yeah, and remember,
Mr. Zimbe, this journalist was thrown out by Mr. James Mweheire, who ostensibly is your chairman.
We had a workshop for Kizito members.
The traders.
The traders. Yeah. And of course, their interest was eminent. They came, gathered to listen to us, for us to explain the values of the IPO, and attendance was good. And it was solely for explaining the IPO. We had no agenda, and it was transparent. Now,
but restrained. Well, of course, there are other issues.
Yeah.
Other than an extreme action by Mr. Mweheire, a respected man.
Anyone who had other issues to raise could have done it through, they could send us an email to inquire on any piece of information.
And doing what they
but our teams, I'm not aware of that. I don't think that is. I'm not aware of what media reports. But I think there was a lot of interest from the Kizito group, and we are very, very interested in ensuring that they progress to actually signing up. Maybe one last point on that, and we emphasized it. There's a process for anyone who wants to buy shares from Umeme. They must have an account.
A bank account?
No. It is an electronic share account, and Patrick can maybe expound on that.
Yeah, basically the Uganda Securities Exchange has gone electronic, so there's no paper format of holding shares. So everything goes through a clearing. It's called an SCD. So all the shares have to be held electronically.
Securities, something.
Yeah, depository, certificate depository. Central depository.
Yes, actually.
Yeah. So everyone has to create that account for themselves, so the shares can be held under your name. So you have to apply for that SCD account, in addition to applying for shares in Umeme.
Mr. Zimbe, maybe you can explain to us the distinction agreement between Umeme and Actis. They own 100%, but why is it not Actis and why is it Umeme, for instance? It's the trading. Explain that to us.
Yeah, Actis are the shareholder in Umeme Limited. Umeme Limited was formed, registered in Uganda under the Companies Act, and it definitely is normal for any investor to have a purpose vehicle to undertake business in any country where they invest. It is there's nothing trading name. Yeah, there's nothing unique about that. Now, as you are aware, there was a joint venture initially, and Actis bought the other partner and took up 100%.
What was that? Bloblek?
No, that was Eskom.
Eskom.
Yeah, from
South Africa. Yeah. All right. Well, our time cuts us short. Thank you very much indeed. Our dear guest, Mr. Sam Zimbe, General Manager, Corporate and Regulatory Affairs at Umeme. Thank you for coming to Spectrum. Although you could not answer the question of you need to get a report, you don't react to media reports about the arrest of Radio 1 journalist. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt until you read it from your briefings. Mr. Patrick Mweheire, Head of Corporate and Investment Banking at Stanbic Bank. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. She's to Spectrum. We'll be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in English.
At Tusker, our expert lawyers believe by taking the time to get